So this is the new Colour FPV250 from HobbyKing, and they're basically saying that it's 5 different colours. Frame is 130 grams before you add any equipment, and it's got anhedral arms for self-stabilizing. And my past experience has been, when it comes to descending from altitude, you're going through your own prop wash, and it can make the control board basically get a little bit confused. If you're moving forwards, this isn't a problem, so whether it's necessary or not, entirely up to you. But so let's have a look in the kit. I've opened a few boxes. Basically looks like injection molded. They say glass reinforced, but I don't think it is. It's just nylon plastic by the looks of things. Very, very strong arms. Very strong arms. A bit flexy in the middle, but we're going to have a top frame with some uprights. So it's going to, once it's put together, very strong. It's got a top camera mount on there. I think really they've geared it up for the Mobius camera. The 250 size quads don't tend to carry GoPros. They're a bit too heavy, but something like a key fob cam or Mobius, perfectly fine. What we're going to do though is we're going to FPV this, so first person view. I don't know your level of experience, so some I might be teaching to suck eggs, some I might be teaching some good things, but I'm going to go right from the beginning. Packing. What I liked about this package is it comes with some props, and we always welcome spare props. So by the looks of things, these props are 4, so that's a full set of 6x3s, a full set of 5x3s, di-tone props, pretty good. And then instructions, really have 2 bags. A centerpiece for the camera mount. Very big circle on there, but I'll explain this in a moment. Then we have bag screws, M3 by the looks of things, and bag standoffs, and 1 spare rubber anti-vibration mount. Pretty soft ones by the feel of things. They're going to be pretty good. Then interestingly, I found this bag, and it says update parts. Use these posts when building the frame. So I guess we don't use these. We use these instead, because in there are exactly the same thing. Posts and screws. Well, if we compare the 2 posts through the bag, they're roughly the same size. So why did they do an upgrade? Well, if we look at the screws, the thread on those and the upgrade ones are longer. My theory here is that the poster trap between there and the less thread you have out here, with high impact crashes, you run the risk of stripping the upright post. That's my theory. But thank you, Mr. HobbyKing, you give me some spare parts for something else. So, right, sniff at that. Quick look down at the instructions, very straightforward. Width 250mm, height 65mm, 130 grams without electrics, motor mount holes 12, 16 and 19. And this is always amusing me. Colour 250, the latest dyne of di-tone, is a casual frame kit. Please do not severe flight movements. And a bit of Chinglish there. Severe flight movements, well, anybody that knows anything about FPV 250 size quads, that's all they tend to do. So I don't know who wrote that. This is the power distribution board. At the back, basically how to put 8 posts on with 8 screws, or 16 screws. and that's about it. It leaves a little bit up to the imagination, which is why I'm using this video, because a lot of people don't know about flight boards, they don't know what motor to use, they don't know how to wire 1, 2, 3, 4 motor up, and they don't know how to wire a flight controller or set it up. And the reason I say that is because once that was me. So I would like to share my experiences with you, and I hope you find this video useful. I'll continue with my rundown of parts. The motors on the other quads, although they were built a lot heavier than 250 racing quads, I'm going to try and keep this build as light as possible to gain as much power from the motors and as much speed as I can get out of it. I work on a budget, that is for sure, so don't think for 1 minute that this stuff is expensive. The motors I use, I don't know whether you can make those out. They are Emax MT1806 line 2280 kV motors. I bought these as a set of 4. I think it was off eBay. I think there's loads of different motors out there for 250 size quads, but the Emax ones, the 1806s, very good. Props I've got on there at the moment, I believe, are 5 3s. I haven't tried anything else. I don't see the need. That was the research I did. They said they give the less amps at the most power. I'll go with that. Other quads, I'll probably spend the time putting on a watt meter and finding out what the best combination with. This I didn't. Might do in the future. Anyway, this unmarked speed controller is actually an Afro 12 amp Simon K flashed speed controller from HobbyKing. I think they're around about £7 each or something like that. So I've got 4 of those. Now, an interesting thing here is you have CW and CCW screw threads. What that means is counter-clockwise, anti-clockwise. Basically, if you put these in the right combination in the quad, you don't really need to tighten up your props as much because they're self-tightening threads instead of quads that tend to undo the locking nut and throw the blades. These ones won't do that. Really good, useful feature for the 250 size stuff. Okay, so 4 of those and 4 Afro 12 amp speed controllers from HobbyKing. I use Spectrum. My radio's DX8. So DSM2, cheapest chips, orange receivers. I plan on torturing this quad and probably having quite a few severe crashes with it. So these things are about £7. I'm happy to lose that in a crash. Something new this time round is the KK2 Mini Flight Board. I normally use the bog standard KK2. I also use APM 2.6, but the KK2 is great. Does what it says on the tin. Very easy to set up. Doesn't take a genius to understand what is going on with PID settings, self-leveling settings. Not had an issue with this board whatsoever, but I have fried some of the boards I've had in the past just by not concentrating when I've been plugging things in. I've either plugged them in the wrong way or I've put too much power in, and that kind of thing. Just silly little accidents that have cost me £17 here and there. But just read the manual. That's the best thing I can say. This is a new flight board to me. Normally I'm used to a set of pins both sides. What they've done here is they've changed the way they configure it to save weight. I don't know how much this weighs. It's about 8 grams. I think the standard size KK2 is about 18 grams. So they've shed some weight. The screen's smaller, same resolution. The processor, the barometer and everything else on there is exactly the same as the big brother KK2. So I'm looking forward to this. I've had great results on the other quads with the bigger flight board, but where I can save weight, I'm going to save weight. This was about £7. They're normally about £17, I think. It's just a case of what deals you find. What they've done here, interestingly, I'll show you the bottom of the board. If you can see that. What you see here is the list of receiver inputs and the list of motor inputs. So for the receiver, because I use DSM2, I think it's called PPM, I'm not sure. We need to get power from one of the speed controllers, one of 4. So, because I want to do this for new people as well. Basically, only one speed controller that has UBEC has the 3 wires. The other 3, you take off the red wire. Otherwise, you will be feeding 5 or 6 volts from this one, 5 or 6 volts from the next 3. So you don't want to do that to a KK2. That maybe explains why I've blown them up before. Only one feeds the board, and that is number 1, the top one. So I also have that as number 1 motor has the UBEC function. These are all UBEC. UBEC basically means the 12 volts that you're putting into this from the flight battery. The energy gets burnt off through different bits on the board, and 5 volts is sent down. Just going back to this, what they've done for the receiver is the throttle, this one here, has a normal conventional Futaba kind of style lead. That has the signal, the line and the neutral, and that goes across the first 3 pins. It does say on the bottom of the board, okay, but again, all I can do is, otherwise the video will be hours and hours long, all I can do is say read the manual. But if you look here, ground, volts, throttle, so that's your first one. Your next ones, especially on DSM-2, again I'm not sure whether they call this PPM, all you need is the signal. So you don't need the neutral or the line, so you can literally just turn, instead of having them plugged in this way, you can just turn them, put them on the signal line, which is the one along the top, and now you have aileron, elevator, rudder. And if you look, they've been very kind on KK2 when it comes to spectrum. You have your aileron, elevator, rudder, so it's just a straight 3 plug. Problem is with the KK2 is, in order to flick between manual mode and self-leveling mode, which I will explain later, you need an auxiliary channel. You can do it on the sticks by all means and do away with this line altogether, but because I like it on the sticks, I've basically taken a lead apart and taken the I'll show you here. I've taken these out of this, which I shall use elsewhere, and I just feed off my gear channel, and that just goes in the last pin, which is called auxiliary. And then in the menu you would go into the feature, and rather than have stick selected, you would turn it to switch selected or receiver selected. Well, I'll take you through the menu of this a little while later. My previous FPV250 quads have used these zippy compacts, 1300s, 3 cells, so that's 11 volts. The only slight downfall on them is the 25C. I'm not really drawing a lot of amps on this kind of quad, but I am punching a lot of power, so these are probably slightly underrated. Actually, these motors on a really light quad fly on a 2-cell battery, and it's a lovely quad to fly. So I'm not all about big power. You know, sometimes just cruising around on 2-cell is more than adequate for me. Anyway, it doesn't matter how fast you go between branches and trees, it's really fun. One more thing before we go on with the build. This is the power distribution board. And what we've got here, it says volt 1, volt 2, volt 3, and volt 4. Now if I just power up the KK2, move the soldering iron out of the way. I'm not sure whether you can see the screen. It's probably a bit too bright, but anyway, I'll talk you through it. If I'm just quickly going in here and then going down to motor layout, I can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, it corresponds to this here. So that's really useful as well, especially for wiring. We don't cross this one with this one and vice versa on the other one, so that's really useful. So like I say, I'm being a little bit pedantic probably because I'm trying to make this as clean as possible with a minimum amount of wires as possible, and I'm also trying to take new people through the process of doing this. So I don't need to teach you how to solder, I'm sure you can do that, but I shall solder one while I'm talking and then be quiet and fast forward until the next step. Okay, so I'm going to solder one. Make these the best joints you can, because obviously the best joint you've got, the more power, the more efficient, everything works so much better. And also when you're soldering, be ever so clean and tidy, because you don't want frayed you don't want frayed wires. You want it to look smart, professional, and the best you can be. I always say that every time I build something, it has to be better than the one before. I will just show you that. There you go. Okay, so I will just quickly do the other three and fast forward to a video while I do that. Okay, so that is all four now attached in a quad shape. You have these wires go to the KK2 for control. The first one, motor 1, remember 1, 2, 3, 4. Only motor 1 has power. The others have the red line. Can't stress that. It's pretty important. I wouldn't want you to destroy boards like I do. Okay, the reason I stopped fast forwarding it is because this bit is quite important. I want to show you. Basically, I have to run a battery wire from here to the battery. I don't know how long that's going to be yet. What I might also want to do off this, which will be a direct feed off the battery before it's been distributed to anything else, is maybe power LEDs. So I'm going to run one line, quite a long one at the moment, it will get cut back, for somewhere on the frame where I'll take LEDs. The other one, which was from the servo line, I didn't need anything apart from the signal on the auxiliary. I've used that, don't waste anything, and that will take the power from the battery and it will go into the KK2 here, where it is a battery sensor voltage pickup. It doesn't feed this with 12 volts, it merely just monitors the voltage. In the menu you can set what voltage you want it to be alerted to. So if I was to run a 3-cell LiPo, which is 11.1 volts fully charged, probably a little bit more, you can drop LiPos down to 3 volts per cell. I don't recommend it, but you can, as a safe limit, maybe go to 3.3 or 3.4. I go through quite a few LiPos, so longevity of the LiPo is not so important, so I normally take them down to 3.2. The other thing about the KK2 is if you've got this set too high, that when you open full throttle you will start bleeping the battery alarm. That doesn't mean you're out of battery, that merely means you're probably drawing the battery below that voltage temporarily while you get the volt dip of drawing more power. I don't know why KK2 do that. It gets a bit annoying, but if you back the throttle off a little bit, it normally goes away and you can fly for as long as your battery would normally last. Anyway, that's why I stopped. I'm just going to solder this on and this on, but before I do that, forward planning is everything with these mini quads. There doesn't appear to be a front or a back to this. It seems that I know what these are for. These are for the camera mount here. They clip in 2 feet at the bottom, 1 foot on the roof. It goes there or it goes there. I kind of wish they had supplied another one, a flat one with no circle, for connecting the FPV gear on It's not important, I can make one, but it'd be nice using the same plastic. That's my only criticism. Anyway, we're going to call that the front for now, doesn't matter. So bring this over here. What I did, as I said a moment ago, to speed up the video, I've already cut most of my leads down to length. So my speed controllers, this is the heat part here, the big black block. It gets pretty warm, so you want to keep it into airflow probably. I like it neater underneath, but underneath here you have the foot, it's going to be close to the ground, crashes, that kind of thing. And equally at the top it could hit something, especially when flying forward and hit a tree. It's a hard one to decide that. I'm not going to make that decision yet. What I am going to do though is I'm going to get standoffs and the screws prepared and ready there. Hopefully they don't start sticking to the magnets of the motors. Get them all out there. These are the new upgraded screws and posts. Like I say, without closely inspecting them, I don't really know whether it's any different in the pole, but it certainly looks different on the screw. So let's just make sure it's a nice, yeah, it looks like a nice quality thread. It's not clicking. Good. This cord will probably be taken apart and maintained quite a few times. I probably don't want to get in the rounds of Loctiting these in, not for the purpose of this video. Maybe you could just Loctite the bottom one so you can take the top on and off. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Loctite, only because getting the screws out in the future poses an issue. Anyway, really recommend a good pair of hex driver screwdrivers. Right, basically I'm going to show you one and then I'm just going to forward until the next stage. So we're going to use as much hand pressure as we can. There's the post. I'll shut up and get on with it. Well, it was quite easy. I mean, it's only 8 poles and 8 screws, isn't it? But it looks like some of the powder coating, whatever they coat these in, some of it had gone into threads. Some of the threads were a bit tight. There's really no purchase to tighten these up. So maybe you, rather than use pliers directly on this and marking this, because it does look nice, put some cloth on there or something between your pincers, tighten it up. I'll tighten it all up at the end, but for the purposes of this. Now the reason I did that was to again gauge where everything's going. It's interesting. Okay, so basically this is why we make these videos. I can't get those down, I can't get this board down because I'm supposed to put them on afterwards. As Charlie would say, silly old daddy. Okay, so we're going to have a motor there, speed controller there. Sorry. Okay. So if we just have a look at the top deck now, one of the slight things I don't like about these quads is the fact that the battery has to go on top. It looks ugly, it's unprotected, but in a crash, if the battery gets ejected, I'm not that bothered. The batteries are fairly cheap, they're only a £5 each, so you know, in the greater scheme of things, whether we can, well, we can't fit it underneath after, maybe, I don't know. It's a pain in the bum trying to slide that in and out. Let's just try this theory, you know, roll with me. So KK2 there. Maybe. I don't really like the idea of passing this over the board every time I want to do a battery and move. They looks like they're smaller at the front and back, so as I slide it here I'm going to only bit hit those anyway, so it has to go on top. There may be some landing gear skids I can get and put that underneath like a helicopter landing skid, put the battery underneath. That could be a solution. I like that idea simply because it keeps the weight at the bottom, so you get a better pendulum effect and you don't get a top heavy quad. Don't seem to mind that though on the FPV racing side of things. Maybe makes it more agile. We're going to learn as we go. But anyway, my original point was wherever I put the battery, let's hypothetically say it's going to be at the top. We're going to want to get the power lead, which I use Dean's. We're going to be able to get the battery plugging in and out of it with ease, without it being a pain in the bum every time I've got to do it. I'll be running a Velcro strap through there or around the entire quad, not sure yet. But either way, I imagine it's going to be something like that. So I will probably want to come out the back of... Okay, well, that took longer than I thought. Some modifications had to go on to get the motor screws to even meet the motor. So the way I achieved that is I countersunk the hole to the top of the screw. Still a good fixing. I would have had to buy longer screws. They're very small screws, don't know where I can get them. But your motors might be different. If you're following this video to be exact, then you're going to have to make the same modification or buy longer screws. So just bear that in mind. However, because I've countersunk them, they're nice and flush now. So that's useful, because one of my other tips and tricks for quadcopters is that you'll notice here at the bottom of your motors there is a lovely circlip that likes to go missing sometimes. I've had a motor completely disassemble itself mid-air simply because the circlip fell off. What I tend to like to do is to put a bit of tape or something over here, a light or tape or something just to catch that circlip, because they're so hard to get hold of. So a little bit of tape across there goes a long way. So we'll do that modification at some point. Okay, so now this is what it looks like the other side. We have now a dedicated front, because as we remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1 over here. Okay, confusing myself. Turn it around. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1 speed controller has all the wires. 2 does not, 3 does not, and 4 does not. I should have known which was forward and backward because I put the tail for the power line there, so I should have known it. But, okay, it's getting pretty late now. We'll do as much as we can and then we'll just do some more tomorrow. Right, I think the best thing to do is try and tidy this up so we can see what's going on a little bit more, and we'll bring out our friends, the tie wraps. And what we're going to do is we're going to locate the top of the speed controller. Again, I'm trying not to twist the wires, I like them nice and straight. Where are we going to put this? So just talk to yourself slightly and go, right, this looks nice, like that, that's nice. And this sort of is sitting in its own place. Wherever it goes, it wants to sit there, which I'm fine with because it's in as much airflow as possible. So let's go with it there. So we're going to go a nice little place here to run tie wraps. You'd be tempted to run a Velcro strap maybe, but just bear in mind that you don't want anything over your speed controller. You want maximum temperature. You know, you don't want to put it in a blanket, do you? Anyway, let's find where that naturally sits. Now I wonder if we can probably get them wires tucked in there too. Now, where I'm going to slightly deviate from my plan about beginners here is that I was going to make this video absolutely idiot proof. Maybe I should just for video length maybe recommend you look up how to wire up brushless motors and speed controls, you have 3 wires. Basically, any one can be a power or a communication to the motor. If you look up how to reverse the spinning of the motor if they're spinning the wrong way, look them up. But what I do is I find out, that's why I dedicate each motor per side, because I can hard solder them in. I don't have connectors. Again, I'm saving weight there. Look it up, it's out there. So again, nice and tidy, maximum airflow. Okay, so carrying on, time to put the KK2 board on now, I think. Yep. Little tip for you, the original bag of screws they told me to disregard for the upgrade kit. I'm going to use 4 of those to mount the KK2. These holes are not pre-threaded, so to do that, since they're plastic, I just run a screw in and out, and there's your thread. I'm not going to tighten them up that much anyway, so let's start with those. Okay, so time, since we've wired the receiver up already, every receiver is different. Follow my guide if you want, or go your own way, that's fine. So remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Some flight controllers go 1, 2, 3, 4. Some go different orders. Anyway, what we're going to do, we're just going to route this through the best we can. Make sure that the wires are where you want them to run. So number 1 is the one with all the wires. Don't forget that. That goes in channel number 1. Negative is down the outer line. Positive is the middle channel, and signal is the closest channel to the screen. Okay, we're keeping it with inside the frame, remember. So number 2 now goes in. Number 2. Number 3 goes in. Just running the cables where I want them to run. 3 goes in channel 3. And 4 all the way through there. Goes into channel 4. Channel 5 and 6, I believe, on the KK2 are for if you have a 6 motor quad, an octocopter. I think you can run an 8 motor copter, but I have just discovered recently that these 2 here can also be used for gimbal camera control, but there is no power distributed as far as 6 or 5. I think it's 6. So you would then need to bring in another line of power to power from 6 onwards. You could use one of the spare Becks, and if you bought the servo connector leads that you can make your own leads up, you could double off this negative and bring the positive. So basically bring the positive and take a negative off, come in here off another Beck, that's fine. Just bear in mind that Becks are only rated to run certain amount of servos. I always find that the speed controller I've used to power the control board normally tends to get warmer than the other ones. I found that by using 2 servos for gimbal control, the other speed controller that I've used the UBEC on gets warm also. I've noticed it gets fairly warm. So, since there is a 5 volt on the distribution board, why not take it from there? There's no reason not to. And then you're not stressing any of the Becks. In fact, if I really wanted to, I could take the power for the whole flight board off the distribution board. It would need me to fiddle around with some wires a little bit, but it's more than possible. And then no one speed controller is using it's UBEC and will be the same temperature all the way around, and it may be the way I go in the future, but up till now I've always learned to use one of the BECs, and sometimes I faff too much, so I leave it well alone. Okay, your choice. So what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to kind of decide where we're going to go with all this wires, how to tidy them up. I may well undo these FlightBoard here and just loop these wires through. I don't know whether you can see, but I can't necessarily do that here because I have the heat distribution there to drop 12 volts to 5 volts. I presume that's going to get warm, so that's why they've left an air gap here between, sorry I can never get it in camera frame, between the FlightBoard and the distribution board. So maybe not bring that round there, or try and do it carefully. Anyway, I'm going to have a little fiddle with that off camera and see how it goes. Okay, so I've done a little bit more wiring, tidying up, trying to make it as neat as possible. Wires always look ugly whatever you do with them, but just try and keep them tidy. It's down to your own personal preference how you want to run them, really. Yeah, so next job really is to put the speed controller, sorry, the receiver, put the receiver where you want it. My suggestion is you're probably going to be running your FPV gear at the rear of the quad and the camera at the front, so you probably want to keep this away from the FPV gear to minimize any interference. So I'm probably going to put it there, or yeah, it's going to have to be there, maybe even on its side, attached to these posts with some tie wraps. It's going to be fine, it's going to be protected, but I'll see what I can do, and I'll show you when I come back. It's going to be the end of part 1 tonight. It's getting pretty late, so we're going to pick up part 2 probably at the weekend. It's Tuesday today, so probably the weekend is the next chance I'll get on this. So stay tuned if you want part 2. If not, sorry I've bored you, but I'm trying to take you right from the beginning right to the end. It doesn't matter whether it's this quad or a big 540 or even bigger. Doesn't matter what flight control board you're using, motors, speed controllers. The principle is the same for any quad that you do. So stick with me for part 2 and we'll finish putting this together and get it up and flying.